Thanks everyone for joining us. I'm Jordan Rutter, Director of Communications for American Bird Conservancy, and your host today. This webinar is being recorded and will be shared with you afterward. We'll be putting links in the chat, but in case you missed them, please know that we'll be sending an email to everyone who registered, and it'll contain all of the links and other information referenced today, as well as a link to the recording. Automated captions are available for this webinar, and you can turn them on by clicking on the CC icon on your screen. Please submit any questions you have during the presentations using the Q&A box so that we can track those and get you some answers. Birds inspire and delight us. They fill us with wonder, and they do so much from pollination to pest control. But birds are in trouble. They're disappearing fast. Thanks to generous support from people like you, ABC works with diverse partners throughout the Western Hemisphere to prevent imminent bird extinctions, improve millions of acres of habitat with bird-friendly management practices, and advocate for and create innovative solutions to urgent threats that put birds at risk. And together we're achieving results. Over the past 30 years, ABC has conserved 3,000 bird species and 10 million acres of habitats for birds across the Americas. Both of those numbers are so important because bird conservation cannot happen without habitat conservation. And habitat loss and degradation is the most urgent threat to bird populations worldwide. American Bird Conservancy is taking bold action for birds and the habitat they need through our Bird Habitat Protection Fund. Together with our partners, ABC has helped protect over 1.1 million acres of land across more than 100 reserves spread across 15 countries, benefiting birds such as the long-whiskered owlet in Peru, the blue-billed curassow and Santa Marta parakeet in Colombia, and the El Oro parakeet in Ecuador. Will you help ABC continue to create and sustain reserves for birds like these and thousands more, including migratory birds, who may have spent their recent breeding season in your own backyard? Your support of ABC's Bird Habitat Protection Fund today will help identify and protect the places that birds need to survive and thrive by securing and expanding our network of reserves and have direct impact on some of the most endangered birds in the Western Hemisphere. Please visit abcbirds.org/BHPF now or scan the code on your screen with your phone. Thank you so much for caring about birds, and a special thank you to all of our ABC members and supporters in the audience right now. You're making a difference for birds across the Americas every single day. Happy fall migration, everyone. I'm fresh off a birding adventure this past weekend where I had the thrilling opportunity to observe warblers and other migratory species like yellow-throated vireo and rose-breasted grosbeak. And my hummingbird feeders, which were like an office water cooler serving some of the juiciest gossip even just a couple days ago, are now only visited by an occasional passerby, probably the young of the year or stragglers still getting motivated to make that huge flight. It's bittersweet to see the breeding season come to an end and to say goodbye to these bright little flying jewels that help my yard come alive in the spring and summer. But I'm not too sad for them because most of them are on their way to an extended stay in warm, lush habitats in the Southern Hemisphere. Migration is wondrous and perilous, but also highlights one of the most amazing and challenging facts about bird conservation. It's a really big job. And when conserving birds, we must consider their full annual life cycles. And that means ensuring that they have abundant and appropriate habitat wherever their journeys take them. And those journeys take them far. Doing that successfully and sustainably requires innovation, collaboration, and partnership. Three values which have been the bedrock of ABC's mission since the very beginning, and three values that you will see in action throughout each of today's presentations. From a gap analysis that helps quantify how much habitat is currently protected and how much habitat is still needed to sufficiently conserve the most endangered bird species, to Conserva Aves, a partnership that seeks to create and expand subnational protected areas in Latin America, to the Latin American Reserve Stewardship Initiative, or LARCI, which is a powerful example of how long-term strategic support can prevent bird extinctions. Today, you will learn how we're accomplishing more for birds and habitats together, and that includes you. It takes all of us. I'm so excited for you to meet today's speakers, so let me introduce you. Daniel J. Lebbin is ABC's Vice President of Threatened Species. Dan works with ABC's programs and partners to conserve migratory birds and globally threatened bird species and their habitats in Latin America and the Caribbean, as well as our programs for marine birds in Hawaii. Prior to ABC, Dan received a bachelor's in biology and environmental science and policy from Duke University and a PhD in ecology and evolutionary biology from Cornell University. Dan has worked for World Wildlife Fund and the National Zoo and participated in field research projects in Peru, Jamaica, Costa Rica, and Venezuela. Eliana Fierro-Calderón is International Conservation Project Officer at ABC. Born and raised in Colombia, Eliana received a bachelor's in biology from Universidad del Valle in Cali and a master's in GIS from Universidad San Francisco de Quito in Ecuador. For over a decade, she has been working for the conservation of threatened and endemic bird species and their habitats in the Andes and the Pacific coast of Colombia. Eliana is author of the conservation plans of 4 endangered bird species, as well as many books and other outreach materials, and she's participated in several field research projects in Borneo, Ecuador, and the United States. Last but not least, Amy Upgren is Director of International Programs at ABC. Amy has worked in international conservation focused on Latin America and the Caribbean for over 12 years, providing training and technical support to international partner organizations. At ABC, she has managed bird conservation projects in Brazil, Peru, Nicaragua, Jamaica, Chile, and Mexico. And she also has served as the Alliance for Zero Extinction, known as AZE, program coordinator since 2016. Before joining ABC, Amy worked with Conservation International and the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. First up, we're going to have Dan, who's going to give an overview of the gap analysis.
Should I share my screen now?
Yes, please.
Okay. Here we go. Can everyone see this hummingbird? This beautiful
Take
hummingbird?
it away, Dan.
Wonderful. So as Jordan rightfully said, most of the globally threatened birds that are in danger of extinction are threatened by habitat loss. So habitat loss is the major driver of bird population declines and extinction that we are worried about right now. And at ABC, our major tool in our toolbox to prevent these extinctions is to protect that habitat for those species inside nature reserves that are designed and designated just for those species. So that's our big strategy. Protect the habitat, we blunt the threat, and we can prevent these extinctions. And so over our history, ABC and our partners together have created over 130 nature reserves for birds. These span over 1.1 million acres. We've recorded and observed over 3,000 bird species inside those reserves. But most importantly, there are 221 of these globally threatened species that live in these reserves. These are the critically endangered bird species, the endangered bird species, and vulnerable bird species, ranked by the International Union of Conservation for Nature, their red list of globally threatened birds. So this network is doing a lot already to prevent bird extinctions, but we have more to do. All of our partners, all of the local conservation organizations on the ground in Latin America and the Caribbean who we've partnered with to conduct this work and manage or own and continue to work at these reserves to make sure that that habitat lasts. But we're left with a question, which is, which species need more habitat protection and how much more habitat do they need compared to right now? So what is it going to take for us to kind of finish our work and at least meet some minimum needs for these globally threatened birds? So this is where we did a big study. We looked at 149 threatened species in the Americas that were critically endangered, or the highest levels of vulnerable, those vulnerable species with small populations or small ranges. And we made sure that they'd been observed in the last 10 years. So we're not talking about lost species, and their taxonomy was clear. And there was one seed eater that it was a little bit unclear of which populations all belong to the same species. So we excluded that. We remapped from scratch their entire range and their habitat using GIS, eBird data, all kinds of different data inputs. So we had the most accurate maps possible. We overlaid those with maps of existing protected areas. And so then we could see were the birds inside protected areas or outside, and by how much? And then we set two different conservation targets to compare against. The first was a population-based target where we wanted to have enough habitat that we could support 1,000 mature individuals. And if the bird species didn't even number 1,000, let's say there were only 200 or only 50, then we want to make sure at least that smaller number was covered by habitat protection. And we use estimates of territory size multiplied by the number of birds to get those estimates for each species. And that's how we got that target. And then we did a second target that was a little bit more conservative based on a percentage of that area of habitat that we remapped, where if a bird had a relatively small range of less than 50 square kilometers, we wanted to protect 100%. And if it had a really big range of 20,000 square kilometers, we capped that at 4%. And then we had a sliding scale between using an algorithm to adjust depending on the size of the range of the bird. So we set these targets and we got some results. So the good news was that for that more stringent population-based target, 93% of the species already had their goals met, and only 10 species or 7% were still short of their goal. When we looked at that more conservative area-based target, 64% of the species met their target, 36% did not. That was 64 species. So we have more work to do on those 64. Also, the 10 species that didn't meet the first target were part of and a subset of those 64 that didn't meet the second target. So these are the 10 species that didn't meet the first target as well as the second target. We have 5 kinds of hummingbirds at the top. We have some parrots from Ecuador on the bottom, as well as some more arid country species from Peru and Ecuador on the bottom. And these are gorgeous birds. We're ABC and our partners are actually working on all of these right now to increase habitat protection. So we have active projects that are continuing to try to improve the situation for these species. This is the list of all 64 of those species. A couple patterns I'll just mention quickly jump out. The first column are non-passerines, non-perching birds. So we have a lot of hummingbirds. We have a few parakeets and parrots in here, but generally it's dominated by hummingbirds, small birds, and then all the rest, the second 2 columns, are all songbirds, perching birds. And that's because these smaller birds have smaller range requirements, and they're more prone to evolving into these smaller endemic populations restricted to small ranges that then can get threatened if habitat loss comes into play in their small ranges. Then we mapped everything. And I'll explain this map quickly for you. So this is a map of the region that we looked at. The green areas are existing protected areas, existing nature reserves. The lavender color is the combined area of habitat or ranges of all those 149 species we looked at. And you can see that there's a lot going through the eastern slope of the Andes. There's a lot in eastern Brazil. There's less inside the middle of the Amazon. And that's because a lot of those species are widespread and well represented in protected areas. And so they're not globally endangered. And then the darkest color, this dark purple, is the area that if we were to protect that area, then we would actually meet all of the goals for all of those species. And that area that we're targeting for new protection is less than 0.1% of that entire landscape. So it's a lot of land in raw numbers, but it's a relatively tiny, tiny percentage or portion of the overall landscape. And if you're interested in all the details of how we got all this, we published a preprint version of this paper online, and you can read a lot more detail about that. So we're in the process, I mentioned, of working on protecting more reserves for these species. Just as one example, this is the golden-backed mountain tanager. It only lives in very high elevation cloud forests in Peru, in central Peru. And we just celebrated the designation of a new protected area with our partner Nature and Culture International in Peru. And we have in process another designation that hopefully will get accomplished later this year. And when that happens, we will have met those minimum goals for protection of habitat for this species, which is wonderful. And this is just one example of a project that's funded through Conserva Aves, which Eliana is going to be speaking a little bit more about later in this session. So next steps, in a lot of these, and this is just the Andean region. In some countries like Ecuador, we have a great partnership with Hokotoco Foundation there, our partner there, and we just need to keep working on what we're working on with them. They've already established reserves for most of the species that we're interested in, and we just need to accelerate the expansion and build out of those reserves. In other countries like Peru and Colombia, we have similar partnerships and have had similar successes, but there are additional species where we need to actually develop some projects from the beginning so that we can then implement them and get them going for those species. So that's going to take a little bit of extra effort. And then Bolivia, there's really just one species, the Apollo cotinga, which is the species in my background. And we have a project going for that right now, but we need to scale it up and continue it to get more acres under protection for that species. So in conclusion, this body of work, it's big, it's ambitious, but it's really doable. This is something that we can accomplish. And there are some even bigger land protection initiatives going on globally right now. Maybe some of you have heard about 30 by 30. This is a global initiative to protect 30% of the world's land, terrestrial habitats, and marine habitats. But if we don't get this 0.1% of habitat for birds, these much bigger initiatives that could even protect more than 30% are not going to succeed in preventing bird extinctions without these very critical small places that we've identified. And so I want to thank, of course, Conserva Aves and all the other donors who've helped us as we are increasing protection for many of these gap species right now. And again, as mentioned in the introduction, listeners to this webinar can help us in this endeavor by supporting our Bird Habitat Protection Fund. Often we get questions, what can I do in my backyard or here where I live to protect these most critically endangered species? And in most cases, I certainly don't have any of these species living in my backyard, and probably many of you don't either. And so really for these critical areas, one of the best things you can do is join ABC and our partners and help us with these efforts where they're needed most.
That's a great tip, Dan. Thank you so much. And thank you for your presentation. We definitely are going to see you back at the Q&A portion at the end of the webinar. Folks, you've been great and so engaged. We'll definitely make sure to get some of those questions to Dan at the end. But next up is Eliana, who is going to share about how partners are coming together to actually put this work into process and make it happen for the birds. Welcome, Eliana. Your slides look great.
Thank you, Jordan. And thank you so much, all of you, for being here this afternoon. So as Jordan mentioned at the beginning, I am project officer and I work in the international program at American Bird Conservancy, but I'm also part of the management team that coordinates the Conserva Aves initiative at a regional level. And as you can see in the slide, Conserva Aves is mainly lead for 5 international partners, including ABC, Audubon, BirdLife, Birds Canada, and Redleg. Next, please. So basically, Conserva Aves is an hemispheric initiative that supports local communities, mainly Afro-descendants and indigenous communities, to create, expand, manage, and sustain subnational protected areas in the long term. And we do this mainly in those critical areas where the bird species are found. As Dan was explaining, we have all these areas already mapped and identified, not only for threatened species, but also for migratory bird species. Next, please. So the reason we are working at an hemispheric level is because of this, because as many of you know, we have more than 300 migratory species that move every year between Canada and the US to Latin America. We need to conserve habitat all across the Americas to be sure that these species can survive. And we also, only in Latin America, we also have around 400 species that are threatened. And additional, we have like those endemic and range restricted species that are affected by habitat loss. Next, please. So Conserva Aves initially started in 2022 with support of Bezos Earth Fund, and the main goals of Conserva Aves is to create new subnational, 100 new subnational protected areas that cover at least 2 million hectares. And of course, all the partners that are part of Conserva Aves were working on this even before the initiative, but they came together to reach like these common goals. And Conserva Aves was based in a program called Conserva Colombia that was developed in between 2010 and 2017, and it proved to be very successful, and more than 90 new protected areas were created only in Colombia with that program. And of course, it also helped the national governments to reach these international commitments with the global framework of biodiversity. Next. I want to show you very quickly the model of the initiative. I don't want to go into a lot of detail because we don't have enough time. But basically, as I mentioned, we have like our target audiences, but Conserva Aves has two main implementation modalities. The main one is the public request for proposals, and as the name suggests, it's just an open call where any organization can submit proposals to designate or create new protected areas. And it goes through a selection process that have certain requirements and certain like qualifications. And then the grants are awarded by our national partners that I will talk about them later. And then we have the direct strategic investments. That is basically what ABC does and what I'm going to tell you a little more in this presentation. Next, please. So right now, this is a little bit of our network that is part of Conserva Aves. We have more than 70 organizations that are part of the initiative. Of course, these include the 5 like lead organizations that I already told you about, but we also have the national partners that are mainly REDLAC and BirdLife partners. So we have like a couple of partners per country that are in charge of those public requests for proposals. So for example, in Colombia is Fondo Acción and Calidris, and in Peru is Profonampe and EPCOAN, but is like by pairs in each country. We have all the local beneficiaries or local partners who are the ones that actually implement the activities on the field and are the ones in charge of these designations. And of course, we have our donors that are very important to make this work happen. That is Bezos Earth Fund and Global Affairs Canada. Next, please. So far, we are working in 7 countries. And there are 167 protected areas that have been created or are in process of being created. Sorry, that cover more than 2.2 million hectares. You can see in the map, the ones that are lighter green are the ones that are already designated, completed, and the other ones are in process. So hopefully, if all these designations and all this process go well in the next year or 2, we are going to have to achieve the goals that we set up for the initiative initially, and we will have to set up new goals for Conserva Aves. Next, please. All these more than 150 protected areas are benefiting 1,200 bird species that include 92 threatened species in critically endangered, and vulnerable, and 58 species of migratory birds. Next. So now I'm going to tell you a little more about the direct strategic investments, as we call it for short, just direct investment. And it's basically direct financial support to existing organizations to create, expand, manage, and implement conservation actions in protected areas. Many of these partners that we are working with right now are already part of the ABC partner network. Some of these partners, we have worked with them for more than 10 years, but there are also new partners that we got to meet thanks to Conserva Aves, and that they are, let's say, new to this whole network. Next. ABC direct investments. We are working in 5 countries: Mexico, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, and Bolivia. And as you can see in that little table, I tried to do it summarize because it's a lot, but some areas have already been declared and others are in process, and we hope to have more results in the next year, as I mentioned before. In Colombia, for example, we are done with all our projects, at least or direct investments, at least for now. It doesn't necessarily mean that we are not doing it ever again, but for now, like all the projects that we invest in Colombia are completed, and it was 12 areas designated. So I'm going to tell you very quickly a few success stories in each country. Next, please, just for you to have a better idea. So in Bolivia, we are working with 2 national partners to create 4 protected areas. The photos that you see here is specifically of our work with Natura Bolivia to create the municipal reserves Comarapa and Saipina. These were designated at the end of 2024 and is protecting more than 9,000 acres to protect the habitat for the red front-tailed macaw, that is a critically endangered species. So the area, of course, is not only important for the species, but as you can see, I put a photo there of those paintings in the wall that is also culturally important for the communities. Next, please. In Colombia, as I mentioned, we finished all our projects there, but we work with 9 partners to create and expand 12 protected areas. This specifically is the Cundinamarca and Pira Reserve that we work with our partner Fundación Camaná. Part of the activities that were supported in this reserve was the implementation of a sustainability strategy that was based in ecotourism. So 2 of these cabins were built with support of Conserva Aves, and tourists can go there and stay for the night and see the ant pita, that is endangered, and it has a very restricted range. This project is also being supported by LARCI, that Amy is going to tell you more about it later. Next, please. In Ecuador, we work with Fundación Jocotoco and Rainforest Trust in the designation of the Richley Reserve that is protecting more than 500 acres for the red-faced parrot. It's a very distant area, so we only have photos from the habitat, but it's very well protected. It's habitat that is very well conserved for the species. And additional to this project, we are working with 3 additional partners to declare 6 protected areas more. Next, please. And well, I'm not going to go deep into this because Dan already mentioned it, but in Peru, this is our most recent designation, less than a month ago. And it was in Peru with Nature and Culture International and Rainforest Trust to protect habitat for the golden back mountain tanager. And Peru is actually one of the countries where we have more hectares. We are working like in more extensive areas, and hopefully all of those will be designated and protected in the next year or two. It depends a lot. Many of these areas are governmental designations, so we work with local governments, and it depends a lot on that political willingness and the community support. I don't have a slide for Mexico. We just started our projects in Mexico in 2025. We're working with 2 partners in 2 areas, El Tokyo and Sierra de Atoyac. And hopefully those also will have good news about those areas in the next year. Yeah, I think that's my last slide. Next, please. Thank you so much. We have the website for Conserva Aves, all the news, all the new areas are always published there. So if you have the time, please visit. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Eliana. That was wonderful. And again, we'll see you back at the Q&A portion at the end of the presentations. Thank you so much to our audience for being so engaged with all of your questions. Make sure you're using that Q&A box so that we can track them. Next up, I'm going to welcome Amy, who's going to tell us more about LARCI. That's the acronym and shorthand word that we use. But Amy, it's such an incredible program. I'm excited to learn more.
Thank you so much, Jordan. Let me share my screen. All right, is this coming up all right?
You're still in the work mode.
How about now?
Not yet. There you go. Take it away.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So Eliana talked about reserve creation through Conserva Aves, which is an essential step for bird conservation. But reserve conservation is just the beginning. Reserves need to be managed, to be sustained, and that's where LARCI comes in. So LARCI is the Latin American Reserve Stewardship Initiative. It's a partnership between March Conservation Fund, ABC, and many Latin American and Caribbean conservation organizations to strengthen both reserve management and the organizations themselves. LARCI provides support and funding to Latin American organizations to effectively protect habitats, build financial sustainability, such as through ecotourism, tackle threats to birds, and engage and support local communities, all towards the goal of protecting birds and the habitats that they depend upon. So this year, we are celebrating the 10th anniversary of LARCI. Last month, we held a summit in Bogota, Colombia with LARCI partners and donors to discuss all of the achievements of LARCI over the past 10 years and our goals for the future. And I have a few stats to share with you about LARCI's accomplishments over the past 10 years. To begin with, LARCI has, in 10 years, provided over $3.8 million to strengthen conservation NGOs, non-governmental organizations in Latin America and the Caribbean. About half of those funds have gone towards protected area and reserve management, about a quarter to organizational strengthening of those NGOs, about a quarter to their business practices, and about a tenth to fundraising efforts. Those are really scattered throughout all of these different categories. Over 10 years, 29 different NGOs have been funded across 13 countries in Latin America and the Caribbean, a truly remarkable achievement. And over those 10 years, over 70 reserves have been supported. And these reserves protect migratory species, they protect resident species, they protect many critically endangered and endangered species like the ones that Dan was talking about during his presentation. 56 ecotourism projects have been supported, and this includes infrastructure work like building cabins. You can see in the photos here, cabins in Dominican Republic, in Jamaica, in Bolivia, bird towers to observe birds in Brazil, capacity building work, marketing campaigns, attendance in global bird fairs. All of this work has been supported by LARCI. The salaries of 147 different conservation professionals have been fully or partially supported, and this includes salaries for accountants, ornithologists, grant writers, all the types of positions that are needed for NGOs to thrive. Most importantly of all, LARCI has supported the birds. Thousands of bird species have been supported through habitat conservation and direct action, including dozens of critically endangered and endangered birds, like the ones that you can see on your screen. So I'm going to provide a spotlight of 3 specific LARCI projects to give you a sense of the scope of LARCI and the types of projects that we have been able to support through LARCI over the past 10 years. The first is working with Instituto Araguaia, an organization based in central Brazil, where the Amazon and the Cerrado savannas meet. And in Brazil, LARCI has supported Instituto Araguaia's fire prevention efforts, including creating fire breaks, preventative burns, and other preventative efforts that reduce the chances of fires. So in late summer 2022, a large fire developed on a property next to the Guaíra Reserve, one of the 4 reserves that Instituto Araguaia protects, leading to an intense 11-day firefighting effort, day and night, I should say, firefighting effort. And the result, LARCI-supported fire prevention work was fundamental to saving this reserve. You can see here in the photo that the burned area went right up to the fire break that protected the Guaíra Reserve. That was really incredibly necessary work that needed to be done to protect the birds, including Kempfer's woodpecker, for example, that live in Instituto Araguaia's reserves. So moving over to Peru, LARCI has supported ecotourism work with Ecowan, our partner in Peru, to enhance financial sustainability at 2 of their reserves. And this includes, you can see here, trail maintenance, fixing roofs, putting up trail signs, very necessary road maintenance, and other infrastructure needs. In addition, LARCI has supported Ecowan's participation at international bird fairs and the development of marketing information and materials and brochures. Over 4 years of LARCI support for ecotourism, tourism earnings at these 2 reserves increased by 84%. And my last example is from Bolivia, where LARCI supported the NGO Asociación Armonía in their work to really create and build a sustainable cattle ranching venture at their Barba Azul Reserve. So LARCI supported the creation or development of a business plan for this work and initial efforts to study the relationship between cattle and the presence of savanna birds at the reserve. Armonía was able to leverage this funding into even larger grants to help advance their cattle ranching program. As a result, Armonía anticipates that starting in 2027, their sustainable ranching program will not only be self-sustaining, but will generate financial revenue for their conservation work. ABC would like to express our profound gratitude to, oh no, it went away, my slide, to March Conservation Fund for its exceptional contributions to conservation capacity building and reserve management in Latin America and the Caribbean through 10 years of support for the LARCI program, as well as the many partners that have worked with LARCI to improve reserve management and institutional strengthening.
Thank you so much, Amy. That was wonderful. And there's definitely lots of thanks to be given, at least a lot of gratitude for all of this incredible work. I'm excited to welcome Dan and Eliana back for our Q&A. Again, thank you so much to our audience for all of your questions and engagement throughout the presentations. Dan, I want to start with you, just since you gave the presentation first. And I'd love for you to share a little bit more about why the focus on terrestrial birds. A lot of folks are wonderful and focusing on the entire Western Hemisphere or even global region of birds and really concerned about those marine species that you mentioned. So basically, is there a plan to do a gap analysis in other areas, water areas for marine birds? And what's next for the publication?
The publication's been submitted, and so that's going through the peer review process right now. I think we're pretty optimistic that that should hopefully get accepted and come out soon. So that's straightforward. The analysis I presented of terrestrial birds actually did include water birds. The water birds, however, think about it. Imagine you're a water bird. You've evolved to take advantage of watery resources, which can change drastically during the course of a single season. And so a lot of water birds are really great flyers. You don't have range restricted water birds like you do for these other songbirds. So the water birds as a group aren't as threatened. Yes, shorebirds are a rapidly declining group, but they aren't frequently as threatened as these other birds, or they're already represented in some protected areas. So they didn't come out in this analysis the same way as other birds. For marine birds, that does require a different analysis. And we have an entire program devoted to marine birds that focuses on keeping marine birds safe, particularly at their island nesting colonies. And much of the time, those places may be protected, but so the forest or the island might not be in any danger of conversion to a farm or a city, but there's introduced rats that are eating those eggs, or introduced mongooses or cats that have decimated the colony. So we focus on controlling invasive species like that and protecting colonies inside fences or with social attraction with other means. And then at sea, seabirds face mortality in fisheries. So we work with different fishing industries to reduce that mortality by introducing innovative fishing gear that helps reduce that risk to seabirds. And of course, we're also working to connect people and communities to have kinship with the marine birds, because for most people, marine birds are way off at sea, out of sight, out of mind. And so building those connections with people to make sure that awareness is built is really important for seabirds.
Thanks, Dan. Eliana, I'd love for you to share a little bit more about Conserva Aves. I know that that is helping to implement and execute a lot of the projects that the gap analysis has identified, right? So how, when you have all of these birds, all of this area, all of these partners, how are you finding prioritizing the needs and different conservation efforts that you're working on? How is it going working with all of those partners with Conserva Aves?
I mean, it is amazing and very challenging because, of course, you have all these like amazing organizations, like international and local organizations that have their own priorities and are doing their own stuff. But at the same time, all of them decide to come together to implement these and work for the same goal. So it is great in that sense. It is very challenging to try to prioritize. I mean, you cannot say X species is better than Y, but one of the most important things we consider is if we want to have a protected area somewhere, we need to have a partner or a stakeholder, could be local government, that is capable to manage and sustain that land in the long term. We don't want protected areas that are, how you call it, like paper protected areas. We want areas that are actually like ecological, like that work. I got confused there. But so yeah, one very important thing is, yes, we want the birds to be there, but we also want a partner to be responsible and that could manage those areas in the long term. Yeah.
So it seems like the gap analysis is helping give us science and really important information. That's like one circle of the Venn diagram. Conserva Aves is helping give us the capacity and the like collective support to make this happen, to help identify those needs and ability to make the efforts happen. And then what you were saying about the local groups and partners on the ground seems like another thing. So it's kind of bringing all of this together for the birds. Is that accurate?
That's right.
Awesome.
And then Larcy comes in and helps to maintain those areas in the long term.
Amazing. Amy, do you want to speak more to that then?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I mean, we like to think of Larcy as supporting the things that are hard to fund. There are so many needs that conservation organizations have that are above and beyond, or at least different from purchasing land and conducting bird surveys, which of course are important and absolutely essential. But just having a truck to move equipment is also essential. Having firefighting gear. These are also really important aspects of conservation. Hiring accountants. So many local NGOs and large NGOs are started by biologists with really no background in accounting, financial management. So having someone who can help with that aspect of the work is really a big need. LARCI fills those gaps.
Thanks, Amy. You mentioned the Mark Fund and specifically giving thanks to them. Is there anyone else that any of the three of you would love to thank or spotlight and just helping achieve these incredible results? I know it takes all of us, from individuals to big organizations and foundations, but Dan, maybe there are some ones that you especially would like to highlight.
Sure. I think it's actually quite remarkable how much of a difference an individual can make in these situations. We've had some donors who typically give, let's say, in the range of $15,000 to $50,000, and that alone can make the difference between one of these reserves happening or not. And then also with this Bird Habitat Protection Fund, if you just have a couple dollars to donate through that fund, we can aggregate multiple donations with other bigger donations and make some of these projects happen. But I mean, I remember once with the marsh ant wren, for example. I was interested in this bird. It was underprotected, and I called up our partner Save Brazil, Pedro Develli at Save Brazil, and I said, "Hey, do you have any knowledge about the species? Is there a project that could be done to create some protected areas for this?" And by coincidence, he was having a meeting the next day with a local group that was interested in protecting the species, and he was getting himself ready to say, "No, we don't have any money for this. We can't help you." But when he heard that ABC was interested, he took that meeting much more seriously. We had an individual give, I think it was only about $15,000 for that first grant. And that created a protected area for the species through a government designation process. And then once that was created, it inspired the neighboring municipality to want to do the same thing. And so there's another protected area in process that we're waiting to be completed for that species. So in some cases, you expect a lot of barriers and a lot of problems and a lot of challenges to get these things done. And in other cases, it's just a matter of, is there some money available? And then we can connect that to the right people, and then these great projects can happen.
Yeah, that's incredible, Dan. Now, I think I also remember some other big donors and foundations that are really helpful in terms of just fueling all of this work and making it happen. I think there was one that was even named like something, a bird, right? And there's also some unexpected ones, like who's funding Conserva Aves originally. Do you want to thank any big donors?
Sure. I think you're thinking about the Bobbling Foundation. So they've certainly funded a lot of our work internationally. I had a slide up that had a lot of our donors there, including some individuals. The Conserva Aves work in the Andes that we talked a lot about is funded originally from the Bezos Earth Fund, and that money is going through BirdLife International to ourselves and National Audubon and REDLAC and other partners. So there are a lot of different groups to credit and thank, and foundations, individuals, and then a lot of the Alliance for Zero Extinction work that Amy works on that we haven't talked in a lot of detail. That is coming from the Global Environmental Facility, which is part of the United Nations. And so there are mechanisms to get money from those multilateral sources to the ground with our partners.
Yeah. Thanks, Dan. It's always, my team always laughs when I say that there is no I in ABC Conserve, but it's true. It literally takes all of us, again, whether you're an individual to the Moore Foundation or GEF, to all of our organizations really coming together. Eliana, that slide with all of those logos, it really is so impressive. And I think, I just really want to highlight for our audience just how ABC is helping bring all of that together. We are such a nexus and helping put these birds forward, and that work is progressing and we're getting results because of all of that support, which is just, it's literally foundational, which is amazing. I want to get back to the birds though a little bit. And another thing that our audience is really interested in, and I'd love for you guys to jump in, is about the reserves and ecotourism, right? Going back to how can I help our birds? Dan, you started with what you can do at home in the US or other places that you might live. But, you know, I want to go see these birds, both the migratory ones with the endemics that you all presented on. Can you share a little bit more about our reserves and what all of that means?
Sure. Is that for me?
Sure. Yeah. I know you've been.
Yeah.
I'm so jealous.
So we've created with partners all these great nature reserves for these very special birds. And so they're often some of the best places to go birding in Latin America and the Caribbean. And a lot of those reserves have built tourism lodges to cater to bird watchers so they can share this wonderful experience with people and also get more support, because the income that they generate from people visiting and bird watching helps them pay for their guards, helps them sustain the management of those reserves. So there are, you can go on to conservationbirding.org and see some of the reserves that we've supported and some of the details of the lodges and amenities that those places offer. You can look at, there's a lot of international tour operators who have multi-destination tours that visit some of these different reserves. And some of those are linked to conservation birding, some might not be, but it can start giving you ideas and giving you places that you can think about going. You can book some of these places you can go on your own, but you would probably want to book directly with those partners to make those arrangements in advance. A lot of our partners are connected with tour operators and connected with guides and can help make those connections for you if you reach out to them. So there are some great options. I think someone asked before in preparation for this webinar, someone asked, like, where should beginners go? Where are some of the best places for people to go? In the United States, one place that we help support was Patton Center in Arizona. That's a great place that people can go as beginners to enjoy hummingbirds and hummingbird feeders and other Arizona birds. It's run by the Tucson Audubon Society, but we helped transition that land from the original private owners to a conservation entity so that would be protected in the long term. In Latin America, if you end up going to Quito, Ecuador, for some reason, there's some really close options just outside of Quito. Hokutoku Foundation runs Chacana Reserve, and that's a place that's great to see Andean condors soaring around. That's just about an hour east of the city, and about an hour west of the city is another reserve they have, Yanacocha, which has hummingbird feeders and cloud forests and other birds to see there.
Sounds amazing. Thank you, Dan. I know we'll have a future webinar just on all of that, most likely. And of course, we can always find more information about our work in those reserves at abcbirds.org. But one of the biggest things too, Dan, that you're talking about is all of these different habitats. And that requires different types of management and restoration efforts than folks might associate with the states. And so, Amy, I want to come to you, because one of the things that you were talking about was different grazing and fire. And I think there's a lot of misperception sometimes about how there are situations where that's actually needed for birds. And then there's, of course, situations where it's a threat. So could you talk a little bit more about just how necessary it is for being context specific and knowing how diligent ABC is to that context and focusing on what's best for what bird?
Yeah, absolutely, Jordan. That is so true. And we have a fantastic network of partners who live and are based at the reserves where we work, who have that site-specific knowledge that we work with in all of these cases. For example, the fires that I mentioned at Instituto Araguaya's reserves, these are human set fires. These are fires that are set to clear the land for agriculture. Occasionally accidentally, but they're usually intentional. So these are not fires that are the naturally occurring fires that some ecosystems need to function, as you mentioned. Yeah, and the specific situation is very critical. For example, we're working with Chilean woodstar in the Atacama Desert right now, the driest place on Earth. And reforestation there compared to the Atlantic forest of Brazil, it's a completely different situation. I mean, our biggest problem, our biggest challenge is just getting the water, making sure there's enough water for the bushes and shrubs and trees to grow. And to not be wiped out by the dry conditions. So the context is crucial, and getting that right is important when doing restoration, fire management, or any other type of reserve management.
That's incredible. And Amy, it's been 10 years of LARCI, and I know that you have been participating for such a long time with that. Is there anything that especially stands out or has been so unexpected that you're, really proud of with LARCI as we, again, celebrate 10 years and that, milestone anniversary?
Well, when compiling the statistics that I shared with you all earlier, I think the biggest surprise to me was just how many reserves have been impacted. Over 70 reserves. I mean, we're talking about reserves for the most endangered species in the Americas. We're talking about so many reserves throughout these countries. And at the summit that we had last month, the appreciation for LARCI and the enthusiasm for continued partnership from all of the partners who were present really came through. And there's just a lot of exchange between partners. I mean, the partners in Brazil and Costa Rica and Chile, they're facing a lot of the same challenges. So having that opportunity to come together, exchange ideas, talk about problems together, talk about new opportunities together, that was really special.
It sounds incredible. And I'm sure, Eliana, you could speak to some of that too. Again, with all of those partners represented by the logos, I just have that image in my head now. What have you found a lot of unity? Is there anything unexpected that you would love to share about your work with Conserva Aves? And it can be a result too.
Well, I'm okay, so I'm a project officer for Colombia. So I know Colombia better, I know those partners better, and I can talk about them because I don't know much like the other countries. But one of the things that precisely it happened just a month ago or month and a half in the LARCI summit that we had in Colombia is like I could see how these partners just came together to discuss things that both were having in completely different like parts of the country, and like how they ended up making that connection even after the summit. So I know, for example, some of them are in contact right now and are exchanging information about how to like tackle certain things. And that is super valuable. I think that's one of the most amazing things of these networks. Conserva Aves also makes a lot of effort so that the local partners that are receiving grants from the request for proposals are getting together and saying like, hey, this is what we're doing. This is the challenges we have, how we can solve it. Last year, for example, sorry, no, this was just this year. At the beginning of this year, we had a meeting with the partners in Peru. And we realized, well, like when we got all our partners together, we realized all of them were having the same problems with the process of the designation with the governments. And what ended up happening after the meeting is like there was they called, let's say the government that was in charge of the designations, they all have a meeting, like the partners and the government, and they ended up like solving, like answering some questions they have about how the process work. And now all these projects are moving slowly, but because it's governmental times, but they are moving forward. They are not stuck anymore. So I think it is great that the partners can take advantage of those networks and help to grow each other and support their projects and their reserves.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, all of you. I have one final question for you before we have to close out. And that is, what is one thing that you hope people take away from this webinar and share with a friend? Dan, if you want to kick off, we'll start with you.
Again, this work is doable. It's possible. We've already had a lot of great successes. We're going to work hard to bring similar successes to these other species, and you can be part of that journey. So please help us if you can.
Thank you, Dan. And thank you all of our audience members who are in attendance for joining us. All registrants will receive a link to the recording and all links shared via email in just a few days. Again, the conservation efforts that you've heard about today are only possible thanks to ABC supporters like you who care about birds and believe in ABC's mission to conserve them. Will you please help conserve birds today? Visit abcbirds.org/BHPF and consider donating via your screen. Thank you so much again, and as always, good birding.